Good afternoon, good morning, students. Welcome to the session for learner support in natural science and health 1 and 2. This is the contact classes for the 2021 examinations. Because all the 3 exams will be covered by this presentation. My name is Generosa Simon and I am your tutor for this module. Let's get started with our presentation. If you are to register, if you've registered for this module, you need to work hard because they said hard work and dedication pays off. So we usually just have 1 assignment for this module. So you have to make sure that you do your best for you to pass it, at least 50% and up, so that you can qualify for the exams. Once you qualify for the exams, then you write the 2 hours out of 100 marks, of which you need a sub minimum of 50, and then at the end of the day, the final passing mark will be calculated as 60% of the exams, and then the 40% will then be from your assignment, which is a continuous assessment. So the required is 50% for you to pass after the exam, and the assessment is added together and divided accordingly. So let's get started with our presentation. You are aware that it's a whole big module. It's 3 examinations covered. So that means that we are not going to be able to cover the whole module within an hour. We are given 45 minutes to an hour, so we cannot be able to cover the whole module. So whatever we do, we just try to summarize the little that we can. We also now are informed by by how students participate in general, how students perform in general. So when we come up with these sessions, we really try to cover as much as we can within that hour, but you can see that I didn't even put it in units. I just try to pick those ones that I feel sometimes you need more information, looking at the assessments that we do at the end of the markings and all that. We also just want to make sure that those things that needs to be really critical in the classroom when you are going to be teaching or when you are teaching are also addressed. But rather contact me if you still need further information, because you still have to go to your modules to study. You still have to make sure that you finish it, because this is not all. Imagine 3 exams in an hour. It's not possible. So please, this is not the examination hint or anything. Make sure you study and you finish your module. So let's begin. So let's look at the issue of the conducive physical environment in the natural science and health class. So what do we mean conducive, and why it matters in natural science and health? For example, so whenever you are planning for your lessons, you need to look at other issues. For example, if I am to plan for this module, how do I make sure that my kids will participate? How do I put it in a way that is a participative teaching that will take place? So with that, you need to look, for example, at the facilities that are in your class. What are the facilities that are there? What are those that you need, and what are those that are available? You need to do that analysis when you are planning for that lesson. So you have to do it beforehand. So you look at what are the facilities available. For example, is there labs? Do you need a lab? If so, isn't there? Is there a library at that school? Do you also have the media center? So you have to look at these things, and if they are there that you are going to need to use, then you have to plan in advance to make sure that if you are going to do a practical in a lab. Then you put your things together. If you are going to look at the leaf, you need a microscope. You have to make sure you test it, it's working before the next day. And you also have to make sure that if you, for example, now if you want to teach the kids and you need to use the screen or the monitor, you have to make sure that it's in a position where the kids can see already before the kids even come for that class. So we also have to look at the classroom size and the composition also, because the number of learners in your class plays a very big role in terms of teaching and learning that has to take place. For example, if you have 2 less learners in your class, you have to make sure that you, in terms of teaching, how do you divide them if you are going to use, for example, the group work? If there are so many, how are you going to also address that? So in the classroom size, inform the activities that are going to take place. For example, if you are going to use the pair work, the group work, the demonstrations, the experiments, the type of groups also that you are going to use. Whether you are going to use only, maybe your lesson will be in a way that needs to separate. The boys will be on their group, the girls will be on their group, or maybe you want to mix them. So it depends now on that size of how many groups, how are you going to do it. The seating arrangement also can contribute to the conducive physical environment, because the way you arrange your class mostly talks about the way the learning will take place in your class. So this involves the structure by which the furniture is arranged in the class to suit the learning that will take place for that day. Also the seating arrangement should be such that it facilitates constructivism and a learning-centered environment. So the actual space and the kind of furniture should be arranged according to the activity that will take place that day. So when you especially deal with the kids, grade 6 maybe, then you also have to look at the spacing issue, because they will need to be space for movements, especially if they have to change classes. So you put your arrangement in a way that it will not obstruct the movements of the kids in and out of the class. In terms of the group work also, you have to look at the furniture. Is it the movable ones that the kids can shift around? If not, that you find yourself with the immovable furnitures. Let's say they are stuck in a way that you can't move them in rows. You have to make sure that you be innovative enough to find a way you can support your learning. That if you decide I'm going to use group work today, how innovative can you be to be able to make sure that even if the furnitures are immovable, you will still be able to have your group work. Let's say maybe you can say the learners that are in front face or turn backward so that you can join the learners that are behind you, so you can form a group, even if they have to sit on the tables if need be, as long as the objective of the lesson is still met. Let's talk of the issue of reinforcement and assessment in the natural and science health class. So by now we should be aware of what reinforcement is. So we usually have, when it comes to marking issues, when it comes to behavioral issues, when it comes to whatever decisions that you are making, whether you want to motivate your kids, whether you want to correct them and collect them, you have to look at these two concepts, reinforcement and assessment. That's why they say reinforcement is an event that leads to response strengthening. When you want to strengthen a response from the learner, you have to use the reinforcement. Assessment, on the other hand, is like you collect the information so that you can form a judgment and make a decision. So now between these two concepts, which one comes before the other one? of course, assessment, because you first have to assess where the learners are. You have to tell whether the learner have passed the test for you to comment them and say, very good. That is already the reinforcement, because when you assess and you see the child got 19 out of 20, then you decide what response can you give, what do you do so that you can strengthen, so the same learner can always get that amount of marks. And then if maybe they didn't get then the desirable marks, you also have to look at how do you strengthen in a way that how do you motivate that child so that next time they will be willing to study harder. So we usually have the types of assessment. So you have the summative that takes place at the end of the learning, and then you have the formative that takes place during learning, and then you have the diagnostic assessment. So the summative is usually at the end, like the exams, and then the formative is during your lesson when you give tests, when you maybe ask questions in the class, then that's summative. And then at the same time as you go, then you should also reinforce. So the diagnostic is when you do the pre-test so that you can determine where the child is or their background knowledge. How to reinforce a behavior? You just have to make sure that your praises are direct and they're simple. Very good, Peter. Very good, Maria. I know you can try harder. So they should be direct, and you should make sure that when it's directed to who you make sure that it's directed to that learner. It should be straightforward, declarative sentences. It should be like you praise individual learners that like I say privately. Then you should also make sure that you back up with the praises with non-verbal communication of approval, because most of the time when we communicate, our body language says a lot. You have to make sure that your body language goes with the reinforcement that you are giving. You nod when the child is doing well. So in a way, it's a positive way, and the child would even want to keep going. So you make sure that your body language also agrees with what you are saying. So now we're talking about the reinforcement. Let's look at the best way to give feedback to the learners. And again, I'm not going to say so much, but I just want you to understand that at least you have an understanding of what they say about that concept, about that specific issue. For more of and further information, you just make sure that you call me. I'm available, you text or you email. So let's look at the best way to give feedback to the learners. So you just imagine if you are in the class as a teacher, and then there is this child, or when you were a child and then your teacher was in the class, how would you have wanted them to give you feedback? So the best way is you use the name of the learner. In every meaningful learning process, learners' names are very important as they feel respected and recognized. I did this and I know what it means. So you can see that, you can judge by yourself. You look at the smile in that learner's face. Even if you are teaching and then maybe you are reading out a paragraph and then there is a name there, substitute it with the name of your learner, you will see how learning will take place. So when you give feedback also, and you want to give specific feedback, or you are giving to that learner, you make sure that you also give the name of the learner in the process. And then you also have to make sure that with the kids, you provide immediate feedback so that you can sharpen their understanding, because the issue is still fresh in their mind and they are likely to understand it after that. So you make sure that you praise for what is good. If something is good that the learner say, praise the child. Very good. That's awesome. Excellent. So that at least then they know that next time I want to be the one saying or answering all the questions. So you praise is positive feedback that express approval or commendation. Or maybe if the child says an answer that is halfway, then you say, all right, okay. If in terms of that, you said that reproduction is when it's when the maybe you want to talk about, the topic was reproduction. So be it in plants or animals, and then the child is giving you the definition of how they understand it. It's the producing of new ones, and maybe they say it halfway. Then you try to guide them in a way you are saying, very good. So what do you think? Again, if you have to talk about a specific animal that do it maybe asexually, how do they do their reproduction? If they leave a part that is still not answered, you either comment it and then you let them go on, or you say, okay, very good, Helena tried. Is there anybody else that want to try? Maria, help Helena. So in a way, you are not shutting the child down, but at least they are learning they will know they are a team. So this also helps them to feel motivated in their learning. So you praising the learners help to build their self-concept belief, and also competency and self-efficiency. Learner-centered approach. This concept of learner-centered approach is very important. It's very important because this is the best learning where collaborative learning takes place. This is where peer learning can take place. The reason I emphasize on this one also is the fact that you find sometimes it's very difficult for teachers to manage a group of learners that are working together. You only have 45 minutes and you are supposed to make sure that whatever you do happen within that. Sometimes teachers wouldn't want to interrupt their learning, because the moment you put them in a group of 5, you are also expecting to do some management issues there, because sometimes they get distracted and then they talk to each other, they miss the point, and then they will not achieve the objective of the day. That's why it's very important you understand the learner-centered concept before you enter teaching. If you are in teaching, enhance your understanding of learner-centered approach so that you can have the best collaborative learning. You know, when something is discussed, those kids or learners are likely to remember it even during the exam. Let them debate about things. So that's why I say learner-centered approach is very important. So you need to understand it, that within that learner-centered approach, you will develop the learners. Not just that, learners are active in the learner-centered approach. Not just that, teachers will now become facilitators, because it's the learners learning. Let them do their learning, let them be active. So teachers become the facilitator. You will be the facilitator just to help them here and there, but they own their own learning. Not just that, then the learners will even develop competencies, certain competencies. And on top of that, then the material they will be using are likely to be that are familiar to them, because then they will be either coming up with those materials, or you will know them well, so that when you come up with those materials are those that are familiar to them. So let's start from developing the learners. So when you develop the learners with learner-centered, you need to help them, or you will end up helping them with their positive thinking skills. They will get positive thinking skills. It's your responsibility as a teacher to teach them, or to help them with the methods that help them gain and develop necessary skills as mentioned there, and also help them to recall the right information. So you have to make sure that you help them develop their inquiring mind, their creative thinking skills, the skill to process and be able to recall that information. How do you do that? Through collaborative learning, through the teaching materials that you use, through the teaching methods that you'll be using at that stage. You present the learners with the materials. You just have to make sure that whatever materials that you are using, they are relevant to their experience, integrated with the area of learning. So you have to make sure that if you need to link it to another area of learning, is the best opportunity because we want to give them as much and broaden and expose them to so many concepts that they will need to use in their future, because we are not just teaching for that time. So originate from the local environment, very important. You originate as much as you can, originate it from their local environment as well as from other sources. Let it be as familiar as possible to the learners so that they can relate. The better they relate. If something is already closer to them, even at home, let them collect it instead of going and get something else from the internet that they are not aware of. So that way, the best learning will even take place. And also, how do you develop the learners in terms of competencies? So with learner-centered, learners are likely to understand concepts better because they always learn in a group. Because learning is for us, for them. They are saying ours because they are in charge and they will understand the concepts better. They will have the ability to do things, because then in this way, the learner-centered approach, they are even given an opportunity to manipulate the materials that are used for teaching. They are likely to go for labs, they are likely to go for demonstrations, they are likely to go for tests and all that. So they handle things in their hands, so they will have the ability to do things also even in the future. They will recognize patterns. They also develop desirable attitudes and values. You know, when things are ours, you are likely to be more involved and more willing, even yourself. So learners, the active learners. So these learners will be active. They will be the one doing the talking. They will be the one doing the experiments. They will be the one discussing their issues. There you are just walking through and see where you need to comment, where you need to just maybe you need to say go this way, but you will not stand in front where you do all the talking. So they are active learners. They will be responsible for their own learning. They will begin to develop and be able to work independently and then collaboratively, because they know it's only them that can do it. And then at the end of the day, the best part, you will have so much time to see who is doing what and just do minimal teaching, because you just offer them encouragement, you guide them, you give them constructive feedback where it need be. So it's very important. Sometimes you need to, instead of just hearing, imagine 20 marks. I have seen this in the assignments and all that. 20 marks, you are asking a person to talk about the learner-centered approach. Sometimes you even want them to use the stages that are there in that mind map. Mind you, that's a mind map. Instead of, you try to get as much mark as possible, so that at least when you talk about developing the learner, of course you come up with one or two things, and then you go to the next one. In that way, at least you maximize the many marks that you will get. But again, if you now just talk about the one paragraph to say learner-centered is when it motivates collaborative learning, this is when you put learners in. Imagine, it doesn't have any weight. There's no facts in your answer, so you lose marks unnecessarily. Just put it in your mind, what are the advantages that could come out? They would develop the skills, and it will even help them present materials that are familiar to them. They will be active, and then the learners will develop competencies. And me as a teacher will just end up being a facilitator. And then you can get the full marks for that, be it when, where. And when you enter the class, you don't even have to be thinking of what can I do with these learners. In fact, when you go to that school, they will come and see how you do it, so they can practice it at their classes. Also, you will be an example at that school. And they will know that, yes, this is a student from IOL. And the next one will come soon is from IOL, because IOL students are the best in terms of managing their classes, in terms of best collaborative teachings and all that. At times, as a teacher, you don't want to be the only one that is teaching, that is giving out information, as if learners can also not think. So you have this bright learner, be it somewhere in another grade, as long as that learner is from that school, or even in your class, that knows about that topic or that chapter so much. How about using them to volunteer and go teach the kids that needs to understand it? Because when it comes from the learner to learner, they will understand it better. So these learners can be selected, like I say, from the school and be given an opportunity to serve as teachers, because remember, we are also developing leaders in the future. So let them, the learner, also be volunteer when they can do the best on that topic. You select where they are good at, and then they can teach those ones that do not understand, that need assistance. So you give these learners privilege to teach a number of learners during school holidays, maybe so that you don't distract their own learning, or some other days so that they should also have enough time to read their books and prepare for their upcoming examination tests and finish their homeworks. So you do it in a way that you do not take up their time for their studies. So learners can be used by teachers, serving as motivational tools whenever they have done something good at school, especially if they have performed exceptionally well. That's what I said, that if they know better on that topic, then you use them. So for them even to want to do it more, or for those ones that are still somewhere in the schools that are capable of doing so, for them to be motivated, at least just make sure that you award those volunteer learners. You award them by the either maybe during the award ceremonies that the teachers usually host, or you can even take just a little bit from the SDF, which is the School Development Fund, so that those kids will be motivated, so that they can know that our efforts are recognized, so that they will be leaders for tomorrow, so that those ones that are still sitting there somewhere in that school that are capable can also come out, because they know that, yes, you will be recognized, and they know that you are the one that assists the others when need be. Let's look at the uses of technology in the teaching and learning. So we know that these days it's all about technology. You need to know how to handle technology. You need to know how to use it to your best advantage in terms of learning. Let's look at the issue of COVID-19 that just came up now. The times kids cannot go to school because of something like that. So how are you going to use technology in your teaching and learning? You can get valuable information. Can be plants, animals, or nature. Like I know my son was supposed to go for the excursion this year, but because of COVID-19 they couldn't go. So how about you as a teacher, instead of just scratching off that topic because of COVID-19, maybe then you can say, let's use technology rather. You go to the computer, you let the kids look at those pictures. If they need to look at the characteristics or whatever, they print it out, they do their presentation. It can be a project, and then they come up with a very nice lesson they present in front of the others. They don't really have to see the live animals, because they can use technology still and substitute that trip, and then learning still takes place. We have, for example, also print media. So they can also collect the pictures and bring to school, and then complete their project if you find yourself somewhere where you don't have a computer and a printer. They can still use the newspapers. The kids at some schools are sent home, "Mommy, I need to bring the picture of an elephant tomorrow." And then you have to see where you can get it in the already printed magazines and all that. So you can do the same. So technology motivates learners to change the nature of stimulus and pace of instruction during lesson. It gathers the information which is needed very quickly, resulting in focus, curiosity, and interest. So if you have maybe an overhead projector, instead of writing on the chalkboard, you just project, and in a way then the pace have changed, is faster and you can finish quickly. And also it helps you gather that information. You can go to the internet, you get this information, you put together, and then you just present to the kids. And also at the same time, the kids will be very curious if they even have to do it themselves, that you have enough computers at school and these kids have to do it themselves. Then they will be very curious. They would want to find out. They want to search about it. And it's their own learning. They're taking charges. They are active, like we were just discussing in the previous slide. We just spoke about the uses. Let's look at why it is important in the teaching and learning. It makes learning faster. It's very important because then the learning will go faster as they use other like overhead projectors with summaries, instead of going now to draw that maybe graph on the chalkboard, which wastes time. Then the things are already prepared just to project them. And then it also makes the work of the teacher or practitioners much lighter. Teacher give handout which already calculates or which with already calculated or summarized notes on them. Teachers direct learners to libraries where they will search for information. If there are libraries and there is information computers, they can also send the kids there, and then the work is lighter instead of them doing it themselves. If there are, for example, maybe photocopiers and papers at school, then they can also just make copies, give to the learners, and then they can discuss it together. So technology is very important in the teaching and learning. And mind you, we are now learning through COVID-19 that technology is that important. Because if a learner is at the hostel somewhere and they come from a distance which is almost 1,000 kilometers, they only go for holidays. It means that if they have to stop going to school because their learning was interrupted by the COVID-19, then you have to find a way to reach them wherever they are through technology. Either you print out the things, but eventually you also need to create WhatsApp groups so you can send the information or the homeworks to the parents. So communication, technology is that important. So, and teachers should learn how to use technology in their teaching and learning. So let's look at the importance of advanced planning for a lesson. Teachers, we are always asked to do these filings. We are always asked to have that specific file for lesson plans. And our lessons are checked every Monday for lesson Monday to lesson Friday. So you have to make sure that when you give that file to your HOD every Monday, it has all the lesson plans for the week. So why? Because they want all the teachers to have planned in advance. Because when you are planning for that lesson in the weekend, you already know the materials you are going to use. You start putting them in place. You already know what you are going to do for the next day. So you are prepared for whatever, and you can anticipate also. So you then want to provide a meaningful engagement to the learners. So you answer and ask questions, share ideas, work persistently using academic materials, stay focused on the topic of what has been assigned. It will even help you because you know you are going through this road, and if the kids are deviating, you already know, you anticipated, okay, if they go through this way, I have to make sure that I bring them back. And then you also have to make sure that what are discussions that are going to be there, the questions and all that, to provide an opportunity for the learners to interact with the material to be learned. Because with the planning, materials are ready before the lesson, before even the day of the lesson, they are ready the previous day because you have planned. So you, in a way, advanced planning can provide an opportunity for learners to interact with that materials that you manage to get, and you get them on time. You make sure that you get the right one also, and the ones that can lead to participative method or learning. So it also provides an idea of what learners are expected to learn and gain. Learners should be well informed as to what is expected of them. At the beginning of the lesson, before you start, make sure you tell the learner what is it that is expected of them, the learning objective, so that even when you are teaching, they know at the back of their mind that after this lesson, I'm supposed to know this and that and that. They should also be aware of what is required at the end of the lesson. The learning objective should be written on the chalkboard. So if you now, as a teacher, you have to make sure that you remind them, and they are constantly reminded. So you write them on the chalkboard. But with technology, like I said, if you are aware and you can use technology, you can just, and there's a photocopy at school, you just type them and you print them out, you hand them out, and then you don't waste time on that aspect. So then you have to make sure that at every end of your session, you assess your learners. Why? Because you want to see that whether those objectives you gave them at the beginning of the lesson are met, or maybe within your next lesson you need to recap and give them a bit of the summary because you see they didn't grasp a certain concept well. Let's look at dealing with learners facing stressful situations such as tests and exams. You know, when you talk about tests, you know, when you talk about exams, you already talk about also the issue of being nervous. There are kids that get more nervous than the other ones. There are those ones that don't get nervous hardly, but they also an aspect of being stressed, and then they get nervous. So problem solving, for example, you look at the strategies, you help the kids to focus on strategies that might include planning a study schedule, borrowing good notes, or finding a protective place to study. So you need to come up with strategies that can help these learners to cope with that stress. So lead them to where they can be able to plan first, or teach them how to plan. Also to come up with a schedule to say, today I will concentrate on this topic, tomorrow on this one, and then I go back. So help them so they can create that routine. And also if they can borrow good notes, or also a place where they need to be quiet and study, libraries and all that. So lead your learners so that you can minimize these stressful situations. So emotional engagement, the learner will be emotionally distracted. So you also have to come up with the strategies that can attempt to reduce the anxious feelings in them. For example, maybe you can tell them, you relax, and then you come up with a certain exercise just to make you ease, and not to have that tension that will distract your learning. And you can also describe the feeling to the other friend so that you can talk about it. So try to see if you can, maybe avoidance strategy, where you can say, okay, you are that stressed, go out for a pizza, or maybe see if you can set up the goals that are realistic, and then you put it on a go card or something. Just lead your kids in a way that you help them when they study. They cannot be so stressed, and if they find themselves where they are stressed, how can they deal with it? Ways of improving self-esteem and confidence. So for our learners to study the best, they need to have their self-esteem, positive self-esteem, and they should also be confident in their own learning and themselves as a person. So we know a lot of issues in life can lead to kids losing their confidence, their self-esteem. As a teacher, if you find yourself in a class where you have the child that have issues on that regard, you should be willing to assist that child. You should be able to boost their self-esteem and confidence, because you are doing it for the love of the children, the teaching. You help them. You tell them, face your fears, my kids. Or it looks like I only have 5 minutes, so I will be fast. So you tell them to face their fears. You tell them that you have your goals and work towards them. Let them set their goals and then they work towards them. They should also be good listeners, and in return, even yourself, you should be a good listener. So you have to help them face their fears. They should have goals that they should work on, so that when you know what you are doing, then you'll be more confident, because you know then you are in charge of that situation. Developing of positive values during the learning process. You need to offer rationale. Why is because you want them to have positive values, to know what is the value in this. So you give reason why it's there. For example, a homework is necessary. Why is this certain work important for me to want to do it? A model value and interest in the context of the learning unit. Teacher can model cognitive aspect of the task as well as motivational aspect of both values. Active personal interest should also be an opportunity for voice and control. Interest in learning can be developed when teacher provide opportunity for the learner to exercise more choice and control over their learning, which we said about the active learning during the teaching and learning. So the kids should be active. Give learning in their hands. Let them be active. Let them take charges of their own learning, so they know that, yes, this is of good qualities, of good to me, and then they would want to learn. So how about anxious? There are kids that are anxious. So let's look at anxious and its contribution to learners' performance. In the classroom, the conditions around a test can also influence the performance of higher anxious learners. So you need to encourage them. You need to talk to them. You need to know your learners, because when you know your learners, you know who gets more anxious and how can you deal with them. Because if they are anxious, the learning will not take place. When there is pressure, there is always anxious. How do you deal with your kids? You should know them. You should learn how to deal with them when you know them better. So the importance of learning skills. So as a teacher, you need to know the stage of your kids. Are they toddlers? Are they grade 1s? Are they grade 2s? Are they what? Because at each, they are supposed to be at a certain stage of learning. Pre-leading, for example, if you have small kids, like maybe you have up to not kids, but this is babies. You find yourself at the preschools, so you know what is it. By this time, they should already develop their reading skill. They listen, they speak. Listening and speaking skills should be already at this stage. The motor development and the audio and perception. You should also know how for them to be able to get that skill. What is it that you need to provide them in terms of babies? Toys that can stimulate, for example, their hearing, their sight, so that they can develop their reading skills. So in terms of initial reading stage 2, you look at the kids from maybe grade 0 to grade 1. What is it? This stage, formal reading should have started. This child should have already started reading 3 letter words. And then the fast reading stage, that one is for the adult kids. And you should know what is it that they are supposed to know already, so that you can assist them. This one we have dealt with it already. It's a repetition. Let's proceed. We have 2 minutes left. Evaluation of learners' faces during instructions. You need to look at the expressions. You need to be able to tell if learners understand or if they do not understand, so that you can help them, so that you can do remedial teaching. The prior knowledge. Learners you need to link whatever you are teaching them. If possible, link it to what they already know, from familiar to unfamiliar, so that they can just be able to relate during their teaching and learning. The gender sensitivity, you have to make sure that whatever you do as a teacher, you do not discriminate. Try to balance male, female. There is no such work as for the female only. There is no such work as for the male only. Human health and development, you need to look at the stages of development of the kids, so that you can deal with them. So especially when you deal with teenagers, you need to look at, to know already that teenagers go through this and that, and then you help them accordingly so they can achieve the maximum learning. And the possible goals in nature, setting of goals. We were talking of anxious learners. We were talking of learners that will be nervous, that will be stressed. When you teach them that, you come up with the goals and follow those goals. You look at, set up your goals, for example. As long as they are specific, they are attainable, and they are time bound. You need to look at also, you tell them that after you set their goals, find out as much as possible if you can be able to achieve those goals. And then, what are those negative consequences if you have to come up with these goals, if you did not attain them? You decide if your goal is also against the law. Make sure that whatever you do is not against the law, because it will put you in trouble. You make a list of steps that you need to do. That is a strategy. Like, what strategies do you need to come up with so that you can achieve your goals? So that in a way, the kids that usually stresses, the kids that are usually anxious, the kids that get nervous, get that confidence that we were discussing, get that self-esteem, and then they will be in charge of their learning. Unfortunately, I have to end the presentation. On the last slides, I was a bit faster because time was not on my side. But I am available. 2019, I had quite a number of students that could call me, that could send me an email so that I can assist them. So do the same, so that I can assist you further, so that we can make sure that you pass this module. So contact me, 081 40 8522, jenninangela@gmail.com. Please do consult me, please do call me, please ask for assistance. Do not just sit in silo, so that we can make sure that you have passed this module. You don't want to repeat it. You don't want to go out there with the name of IOL, and then you cannot be able to teach the kids, because it's our reputation that is at risk. So make sure that you contact me. I am available. So good luck, and hope to hear from you. Thank you very much.